Alright, Bradford here with another WoW TCG Classic deck tech. We're going over Merrick the Destroyer. It's a blue or alliance. This is the DeathWing Mage deck. So, the mage's name is Merrick, his last name, so that's why some people call it Merrick the Destroyer. The whole point of this deck is to cast Deathwing. He costs 60. It says, as an additional cost to play, destroy any number of cards you control. You pay 5 less to play him for every card destroyed this way. What does that payoff get you? He has Assault 5. At the start of my turn, target opponent destroys 2 cards he controls. So at the start of your turn, the player, the opponent has to sacrifice 2 permanents in play. He can sacrifice tokens, resources, ongoing abilities, equipment, allies, and then eventually his hero. So that is our win con. We also have Assault 5, but most of the time, you just use this guy. Once he's in play, your health on your mage is 15. Master Hero's health is 40. The Master Hero, when you play it, just goes on top of your normal hero, and the damage stays. So if you're at like 20 damage, and you have 5 health left, well, now you are at 20 damage, but you have 20 health left. So, the Assault 5 is great, but usually you just use Assault 5 to clear off the rest of your opponent's creatures and let your Destroyer triggers just get rid of his board until you win. Let's start with our Hero 2. I wanted to show you it's a very important flip. On your turn, pay 3, flip Nicholas. He deals 2 fire damage to each opposing ally. This is fantastic. This is just really hard for aggro decks to deal with, except for aberration decks, but you get the other ones. You just pay 3, built-in board wipe. It guarantees you a lot of safety, and even sometimes you just use it to kill one creature, but it's just built-in removal, and you'll use it almost every game versus creature decks. How do we get Deathwing into play? You don't actually have to sacrifice 12 things. So it's again, cost 60, you reduce 5 for every permanent destroyed. So that's 12 permanents that we have to destroy to play them for free. Or if we have 5 resources, we can just destroy 11 permanents and pay 5. Almost everything in the deck can be sacrificed. Almost every single card is a permanent that comes into play or creates more permanents. I have it organized by cost because every card is somewhat interactive. Let's go start with this one, Everlasting Cold. This is just a dot you put on your opponent. At the start of your turn, you deal 1 damage to that character, or 2 if they didn't attack on their turn. You can't really stop them from attacking because people can just swing for 0. People don't realize that, but they can. So this is going to add up a little bit of tick damage, and eventually your deck can kind of overwhelm, but this is really just a cheap ongoing ability that sits in play and pressures slow decks that choose to also play a long game. Blizzard, we've went over this, but it's the start of your opponent's turn. You deal 1 damage to all their creatures and their hero, and anything that took damage can attack. So Blizzard, if anything, if a card leaves your hand, you have to destroy it. So you can't cast anything with Blizzard in play, otherwise you sack it. So this is the kind of card you want to sit behind for 2 or 3 turns and just draw cards and survive. Blizzard will make Everlasting Cold trigger on their hero, and they'll take 2 damage per turn. So it's a nice little synergy, but let's move on with the other one drop. Spell Suppression, 1 mana, Silence. You can just do this to shut down the early cards, even if they're not even that good. Sometimes you just want to get cards out of your hand so you can Deathwing faster. I've Spell Suppressioned a Spell Suppression before, and then put a Spell Suppression on top of that one just to get a bunch of them into play. Smoldering Blast. This is Lightning Bolt that comes into play first. So it just sits in play, and then you sacrifice it and Lightning Bolt an ally for 3. Can't shoot their hero. So this is fine removal. Terrible versus the Aberration deck. This deck is hard, has a hard time versus that deck. But it's a mage deck, and Aberration's just good against mages. Let's move on to the 2-drops. We went over Blizzard. This guy's another creature killer. It's kind of like your hero power. He's a 2-drop 2/2. When an opposing hero or ally readies, he deals 2 range damage to it. Mikael the Blunt is an alliance staple, and he's basically a board wipe creature. You can absolutely decimate other aggro decks like the Warlock, or the Red Warlock one, Bagmara. They can just lose in 1 turn because of this. Brittilize. When this comes into play, you can destroy target armor. That's kind of just a bonus versus armor decks. You can also sacrifice it to deal 2 to a hero or ally, and if they took the damage, they can't attack this turn. This will usually just stay in play unless you really need it to survive. Arcane Intuition. Here's a weird one. So the first ability says Preparation. On your first turn, you may play this card without paying its cost. Normally it costs 2, but you're hoping to get 1 or 2 in your first opening hand. When it enters play, you just draw a card so it replaces itself. Your maximum hand size is increased by 1. That usually doesn't matter. This is just a free permanent that comes into play sometimes. Makes the Deathwing come out a little bit faster. This is one of the best cards in the deck. Signet of Manifested Pain is a 2-cost ring, so you can have up to 2 rings at a time, which means another one of these if you'd like. At the start of your turn, put 2 damage on your hero. There's no way to prevent that. And you put a 2/2 token into play with the same class and race as your hero. So we'll be putting 2/2 human mages into play. That their class and race shouldn't matter at all. These are just 2/2s that eventually we can get 3 or 4 tokens from this, plus the Signet itself, and sack all the 2/2s and the token and the Signet, a bunch of other stuff to get our Deathwing. This is a great way to get Deathwing out. This card's also hard for mid-range and control decks to deal with because you can just start beating down with 2/2s. If you play this on turn 2, you get a bunch of 2/2s out of this. It actually takes resources to deal with the 2/2s, and a lot of decks don't have an instant answer to equipment like this. Then maybe they have to dig for it. So, and against aggro decks, you don't really want to take damage, but being able to, first off, you can choose if you want to take damage or not, but you either need to get your Deathwing out faster, or you use those 2/2s to trade. This card does a lot for the deck, and when you're casting Deathwing, sometimes you can even sack enough cards to keep this in play to continue to make 2/2s. I guess they would technically be no longer mage humans, but black dragonskin. Anyways, Mirror Image. This is a card that's never seen play anywhere else. 2-drop, you make 3 0/1 mirror tokens that say, if damage will be dealt to your hero, it's dealt to a random hero or minion you control instead. It doesn't matter how much damage. So if you take 10 from one attack, then randomly one of your tokens will die. And again, when this comes into play, you get 3 of these. So cards like Signet of Manifested Pain can make a bunch of tokens, and then Mirror Image does make 3 tokens. These both help you survive, and they help you get your Deathwing out. And then we have a Tuskarr Kite, which we'll go over later, but this card synergizes with allies to draw a lot more. Let's move on to the resource row and card draw. Eye the Storm. When you play a card, add a counter. Tap this thing, remove 4 counters, exhaust up to 4 heroes or allies. This is just a control card, keeps you alive. You can use this to tap all your opponent's stuff, and then it takes 2 or 3 turns to rebuild those counters. And just note in the bottom right, that's the counter cap, 4. You can't have more than 4. You can't build up like 10 and just start tapping multiple turns in a row. It doesn't work that way. Wanton Warlord. We saw this in the Affliction deck. This quest just says exhaust 4 cards and draw a card. So you can, with this in play, you can just tap like your dot, tap your blizzard, tap a token, tap your hero, pay 0, draw a card. Love this quest, it's pretty cool. There's another one where you have to exhaust 7 cards. We don't normally have that many cards, so we just skip it. Concerted Efforts is very important in this deck. Pay 1, reveal the top 3, and put a revealed cost with 2 or more into your hand. The rest go in the bottom. So this is basically pay 1, look at the top 3, get an even. Deathwing is even. This is one of the best ways we have to find him. We skip these 3 odd costs and Tuskarr Kite, but otherwise we hit a lot of cards that are even. We hit all these and Deathwing and Magni if we need a extra ally. But it hits your Blizzard if you're looking for stall, Mikael if you need a little bit of a board wipe, or some of these other key 2-drops that'll help you survive and create tokens. Magni, he's mostly in the deck for the stash. Stash is when you place this card as a resource, and you place it face up, you get a 1/1 token. Then you flip the card over as a face-down resource. The 1/1 token can help trade early game, or pressure control in mid-range decks, just for 1 damage here and there. Versus ally decks, it can help trade off their 1-drops, which is pretty important. And otherwise, it's just a creature that you sack to Deathwing later. And if you know your opponent's got a lot of removal and you want him to stick around, save this in your hand until it comes time for Deathwing. Then place your Magni face down, and you'll make a token like this, except it looks like a warrior. And then you have the token your opponent hasn't been able to remove. That way you've got 1 extra boost to sacrifice. Last card's Tuskarr Kite. It just says tap the Tuskarr Kite, tap a creature, and put the card 10th from the top of your deck into your hand. A lot of people shortcut that to just drawing 1 card. It's up to your opponent. Just talk to them about it. But this thing, it itself is sacrificable to Deathwing. And the way it's worded says tap the card and then exhaust an ally you control. That means you can put an ally into play and exhaust it immediately to draw off it. This is really good. It means you don't have to have your summoning sickness or sleeping or whatever go away. You can just play an ally or play a token and immediately draw from it. There's a lot of times you're going to see that's a really important play. I didn't really know what to do for a sideboard. I just made this up. Let's find out if it's any good. There's a total of 4 counter spells. I kind of put several of them in there, so you can get so your opponents don't know exactly what you're bringing in. They don't know what mana you're going to leave up. We have Fizzle as a 1 cost, Counterspell as a 2 cost, interrupt target ability, and then Nether Fissure. It costs 4, but it can't be interrupted. I'm thinking if you have to play against like Winter Twin or a hard combo mage deck, or a deck with discard, these are good for early discard, because if they discard your Deathwing, you have no way to get them back, and you just kind of have to sit around and draw one. That can be one of the biggest problems of the deck. You have all these permanents in play, you're just waiting to draw them. So these 4 counters should help us get there. Nether Fissure being uncounterable, maybe it's just a key card and we should have 4 of those. Another thing Nether Fissure does, it says interrupt target card. So this can interrupt abilities, allies, and equipment, like a lot of interrupts, but it can also interrupt master heroes. If a game were to go that long against an opposing deck, a single Nether Fissure versus their master hero will end their game plan. Frostfire Bolt. Your hero deals 2 unpreventable Frostfire damage to target ally. An ally dealt damage this way can't attack or exhaust and loses and can't have powers. I don't know how important the bottom part is, but your main goal is just to pay 2 to kill a guy for 2 damage. This is for the aberration decks. I don't even know if we should build a sideboard for them. It's such a bad matchup, I would imagine. But here's 2 cards that can at least kill 1 ally, and every ally you kill is, 2 damage you're not taking every turn. Alright, quick edit. I had to change the sideboard real quick. I forgot I had Ice Block, but that's Frost Hero only. Just made the sideboard real fast. So we've got, our sideboard's got 4 counter spells, 4 removal, and 2 stall cards. Let's go over the counter spells first. Nether Fissure costs 4. It can't be interrupted. Interrupt target card. This can be good in any matchup where you know it's going to go late and you really need your interrupts to stand out. Also, because it says interrupt target card, you can interrupt opposing master heroes, which usually cost about 10. So there's really no answer to this. If you just have the interrupt for their master hero, that's just the end of that. There's 2 of those, and we put in 1 Fizzle, pay 1, interrupt target ability with cost 3 or less. And then Counterspell, pay 2, interrupt target ability card. This gives you a variety of costs, so your opponent doesn't ever really have an idea how much they need to play against. And I think this is for probably the Winter Twin combo deck, if you have to play against them. Any deck that's going to want to go much later in the game, or against discard that can discard your Deathwing out of your deck. This is your early game discard. There's only 2 of them, but hey, if it's a sideboard card and you draw it, that should help. We also have 2 invisibility. Your hero is elusive and untargetable this turn. It is instant. And opposing heroes and allies lose and can't have elusive or untargetable. That part doesn't matter as much for us. It's mainly, we play this, we go elusive so we can't be attacked, we become untargetable so we dodge all discard. So it serves as both an anti-discard and it helps us take no damage for a turn against decks that attack with their hero and their allies. We could even up this, because this gets to stay in play, so you can sacrifice it later to Deathwing, which is definitely something we should think about. Over here, Frostfire Bolt. I've got 4 of these. You might be thinking, do you really need more of these? You have a lot of removal. This is for the aberration matchup, where your removal, none of it does anything. This doesn't hurt them, this doesn't hurt them, this doesn't hurt them, this doesn't hurt them. Your hero flip doesn't hurt them. Just, you have a hard time versus that matchup. This is unpreventable Frostfire damage to target ally. And then that ally can't attack or exhaust and can't have powers. So you silence a guy, you also deal 2 to him, and you freeze him for the turn. Hopefully just dealing 2 is enough and it'll kill him. The fact that it's instant means you can also use this to interrupt the Winter Twin combo deck. So that gives us 4 main deck ways to shoot it down, in addition to, or 4 sideboard ways. This is another 4 ways you can shoot that card down in main deck. Brittilize as well. So you have 8 main deck answers to it, and then another 4 in the sideboard. So 12 is pretty good for just for dealing with the creature. And then you've also got 4 more counter spells. Like I said, I know I just made the sideboard up real fast. I don't know if it's great or not, but there it is. This deck's really powerful. Becoming Deathwing is really fun. Surprisingly quick too. Normally I'd love to have a set of games to show you. I don't, so I think what I'm going to do is just proxy or just do a Goldfish game, just show you how it goes down. Alright, I've loaded us into, actually the table we use for rating. You can see there's a lot of players here, the boss goes up there. But it's a really organized, easy way to see in case you're a new player. Let's shuffle up our deck. We're just going to Goldfish against ourselves so you can kind of see what this deck does. Alright, our hand we've got, this is a resource, this is a resource. We have 2 resources, Magni's also pretty much a resource. So we have 3 resources and Deathwing. this guy's interaction, he can kill creatures, this can kill creatures, this creates our own threats. This is a great hand. So we're going to start off with just going land and pass, or resource, excuse me. And let's untap and draw. Let's say our opponent does nothing on his turn. Okay, for turn 2, let's just play... If our opponent had creatures, we'd play our Magni out sooner. And maybe in this case, we will say they've got some creature out or something. So we'll play this guy, and we get a random 1/1 token. Let's just use that card for now. And this dice will represent that it's a 1/1. Putting a 1 on there. And we've got 2 mana left, so with our 2 mana, usually it's best to start Signet of Manifested Pain pretty early on. We actually cast this card, and when you cast cards, that's when you get counters on your Eye of the Storm. And so we're done with that for now. Draw 1. At the start of our turn, actually you're supposed to do this before you draw, so that's something you have to get used to. So this is the example where you have start of the turn triggers, you want to put a dice on top of your deck, we talked about. So before you draw, you know that you can... So here, let's just put this back for now. And this will remind us, hey, we want to take 2 damage first. Let's go take 2. I don't have a human mage token, but we'll just use this 2/2 Worgen. That's fine. So we take 2, put a 2/2 into play. Great. Okay, then with our turn, maybe our opponent killed our token or something like that. He's gone. That guy's face down now. Now we draw, because it's the actual draw phase. Okay, so let's say our opponent has creatures that he attacked at us with. They killed our token up. We can play this quest as our resource for the turn. Pay 2. Play this guy, which is another creature that we cast. We get another counter here. And again, he's when opposing hero ally readies, he deals 2 damage to it. So let's say our opponent has like 1 creature on the board, and it's like a 2/2. When that creature untaps, he's going to shoot it for 2 and it'll die. Very powerful card. So let's just say that's our opponent's turn. His guy dies. Maybe he plays another removal spell and kills our guy. He's going to go to the graveyard. Start of our turn, let's take 2 more damage. We remember the start of our turn before we draw, and we get another one of these tokens. We'll say that one came into play. Summoning Sickness or whatever. We do our draw. And for our turn, before we even lay resources, we'd want to think about our decisions. So maybe our opponent took a turn off from playing creatures, played some kind of permanent, like an ability or an equipment. Let's just swing for 2. Alright, you take 2, opponent. Hooray. And we don't really have a lot this turn. If they were to play an armor, we could just Brittilize the armor away. But since we're kind of digging, let's play this thing called Arcane Intuition. Costs 2, so it casts a spell, so we get another counter, and it just draws 1. That's all it does. Comes into play and draws you a card. That's basically all it does. And by not rushing a resource out, we got lucky and we drew 1. So let's just play that resource now. And we can actually complete it too. This is the one that says exhaust 4 cards, which is the same as tap 4 cards, and then flip this quest to complete it, draw 1. So we can just say, let's flip the quest over and tap 1, 2, 3, 4. So these cards weren't going to do anything anyways. So now we just tap those 4, we complete our quest, we get to draw a card. Pretty good deal. So if we want, we can actually go ahead and play another 2-drop. And maybe our opponent didn't play, I don't know, they didn't play an armor. That's fine, but we still just want to go ahead and get this out there while we can, since we have the Deathwing, we're kind of on a clock here. That's another spell we cast, so that's going to set our counters up to 4, and now we're done for the turn. Let's say our opponent does some stuff, maybe he kills off a token, maybe we take some damage from something he did, I don't know. Let's untap. Make sure the dice doesn't fly everywhere, it happens sometimes. We have our trigger, let's take 2 more damage, and get another token into play, and we'll draw 1. Okay, so we want to start actually counting now. Deathwing needs 12 cards to sacrifice. Right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 means there's a chance we can cast him this turn. Let's look at the cards in our hand. We've got protection, another just protection spell basically. In this case, if our opponent had discard, we'd want to rush this guy out as fast as possible. If they had counter spells, we'd want to wait for a good turn for their mana. Since we're goldfishing, we're going to hope they don't have much interaction, right? So again, with 5 up here, 4 down here, that puts us at 9. So if we can get 3 more permanents into play, we can cast the Deathwing this turn. So why don't we start with Let's pay 3 for a Tuskarr Kite. And then let's use that to draw. So we'll tap the ally that just came into play this turn, whichever one that was. And we use that to draw one from our deck. That was a good card. So now we can use pretty much anything face down as a resource. We'll just use Brittilize face down. And we'll cast 2. Put Mirror Image into play. Mirror Image doesn't really come into play, it just casts the tokens. So here's one, and there's 3. So it'll be 3 tokens. So what's our permanent count now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So we have enough to keep 2 permanents in play. Which ones do you keep in play, though? Well, first thing we can do is complete this quest. It just says exhaust 4 cards. So let's tap this ability, this equipment, this ally. That's 4. And let's flip this over and draw another card. This just informs us of what our decisions are going to be for the next couple turns. What I can see, since we definitely want to keep... We don't want to sack all our resources. That's pretty hard to rebuild. We also generally don't want to sacrifice the Signet. This thing is great. It'll just keep creating an army for us over the course of the game. Tuskarr Kite is another one you want to think about not removing because it just draws you. It just helps you get back in the game by drawing you so many cards. So we're probably going to cast it this turn. We have no mana left, so we do have to actually sacrifice 12. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we're looking at 3. Yeah, just get to keep 2 permanents total. My first thought is Signet of Manifested Pain and this resource. So we get 2 2s every turn, and we have another resource to help rebuild. You could also go Signet Tuskarr Kite, because this will help draw you 2 cards a turn, guaranteed. And that's pretty strong. But I already have a Tuskarr Kite in my hand, so I'm kind of planning on just rebuilding my resources. So let's do that. We will say to our opponents, casting Deathwing, sack 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, wait, that stays. 10, 11, 12. So we end up with 2 permanents. This guy goes on top of our hero. And these are going to all go to the graveyard, except the tokens. I shouldn't have put the tokens in there. Tokens don't go in your graveyard. So let's leave those out. All these go to the graveyard. Now we have a Deathwing, so then we have Assault 5. We could swing for 5, maybe kill off his last guy, take a couple damage, and just pass. And then comes our turn. We untap. Our opponent has to destroy 2 cards, so at this point, it's only like turn 4 or 5. He may only have a couple resources, a couple guys in play. It's pretty bad for him. So before we draw, we see our trigger. Let's take another 2 damage. Put another 2/2 into play. Draw 1. At this point, maybe we just play this face down. Pay 2. Let's play this guy. In case they had any permanents, just another threat as well. And swing for 5. If they have a creature, kill their creature. Otherwise, just hit their face. Maybe we just hit their face for 5. And we untap this turn. Take another 2. Put a Worgen into play. Draw a card. Another Signet. Unlikely to need the other one, so let's just face down. Resource that. Let's play our Kite. Tap the Kite. Tap the guy that just came into play. Draw another card. And we can swing for 2, swing for 2. So that's 4 damage. Swing for 5 more. Plus we had triggers at the start of the turn. Which I guess is something to remember. You need to remember that at the start of the turn, since it's at the bottom of the card there, at the start of your turn, your opponent destroys 2 cards. This is another start of the turn trigger, so let's up our count to 2. So we remember there's 2 different triggers we need to remember. Well, that's one take of the deck.